My name is Joy Cabarrus Speaks, and I live in Darlington Heights, Virginia. And I was a part of the 1951 strike led by Barbara Johns when we walked out from the school, Robert Moton High School.
So can you just tell me a little bit about that day?
That day when we came to school, on the school buses usually, it was just a normal day that we came to school. After we got to school and we were in our classrooms, a note came around to the teachers calling us in for assembly. And Barbara Johns had sent a note around to all the teachers calling for everyone to come to the auditorium, bring their students to the auditorium. And she signed the note BJ. So all the teachers thought it was the principal because his name was Boyd Jones, and that's the way he would sign his initial. So when we got into the auditorium and the curtains opened, we saw Barbara Johns on the stage, but we were all in shock because no one knew her plans except the ones that were on the committee. Even her sister, I was sitting over there in the auditorium, her sister was about 3 seats ahead of me, and she was sliding down in her chair, cringing because she didn't know what her sister was going to say next. But I feel that day it was divine intervention because the school was built in 1939 for 180 students. And at the time of the strike, there was over 400 students. And we were attending classes in the tar paper shacks that they had built when our parents went down and they asked the superintendent, and they had PTA meetings, asked them for school. What they gave us was the 3 tar paper shacks that were like a chicken coop. And that's where we had some of the classes. In this auditorium, we had classes. Some would teach on the stage and then a couple in here. We also had classes on the school bus, the old school buses. So that day when Barbara came on stage and she told us we didn't have to accept this unequal education anymore and that we must do something about it, that God was on our side and the child should lead. She went into all of that, but she said we must walk out now and we must stay out until we get what we need.
Can you tell us what life was like during that time just in the community for you personally?
Well, that day when we walked out, some of the students went down to the courthouse. Others went back home, and some went back, their parents picked them up, and some went back on the school bus. I was very frightened because I was worried about what my grandparents was going to say when I returned home and told them that I was out of school for 2 weeks on strike. When I got home, my grandmother was not receptive. She felt that we should be in school. My grandfather was very supportive because he had been one of the ones that had been with Mr. Otis Scott, and they were going back and forth down to superintendent office and everything. And they had gone so many times that at one instance they told my grandfather, don't come back anymore. But during that time, Barbara was taking care of her siblings. And they had gone, the Johns family had gone away on the weekend because the mother lived and worked in Washington, and Barbara was more in charge of her sisters and brothers. And when they came back home, their home had been burnt down. But soon after the strike, they sent Barbara to Montgomery, Alabama to live with her uncle, Vernon Johns, because they feared for her life here. They burned a cross on the lawn here. A lot of people lost their jobs. There was a big sacrifice because, as Barbara said in her speech, we have to seize the moment. Well, that was the moment that was seized, but it became a movement. And the difference between a moment and a movement is sacrifice. And the parents and the students went through a lot of sacrifice because it was a 13-year struggle. It led into the closing of the schools for 5 years and all. But when we walked out, we just thought we were going to get a better school. We never knew. But when the attorneys came to Virginia, they were supposed to be going into Pulaski. Barbara and Carrie Stokes had written a letter for them to come in. In the beginning, they were not interested in the case, but Barbara was so persistent in everything, they ended up coming here to take the case, but they said they would only take it if it was integration.
Were you Were you nervous at all at that time with the uncertainty of the future and the reaction from the community, or?
Right, I think we all were nervous. My grandfather assured me not to be nervous because he said if it got, as he would say, the old expression, if it gets too hot in the kitchen, you'll go back north to live with your parents instead of living there. Mm-hmm.
And what is your family history? Your family history. Your grandparents, you know, your great-grandparents, where they came from, or how your family ended up in Virginia?
Oh, well, my grandfather was born in Virginia. His family came from right down, I guess maybe about 10 or 12 miles from where the home is now. His father was a sharecropper, but my grandfather had said he would not be a sharecropper, and he bought 100 acres of land right where I live now, and his brother bought the adjacent 100 acres of land, and they lived there. My great-grandmother was, she came from a family of slaves, and there is some of her history in, Israel on the Appomattox. It speaks of the Evans family, and my grandmother was Emma Evans Morton, so she was a part of that family. But it goes back a long ways. They owned a lot of land within Virginia, and a lot of them were entrepreneurs. My Aunt Luella, which married my grandmother's brother, they owned a school, a summer camp, and ended up adding a nursing home to their property, which is in Prince Edward County, but it's over near Abilene.
Can you kind of paint a portrait for us of life as a little girl before everything happened with the school, just a summer day here in Farmville for you?
Well, me, I was outside of Farmville, so we were more in the suburbs, more farmland. For me, I think we had a beautiful day because my grandfather, they raised everything. They raised tobacco, wheat, sugar cane. He raised watermelons. We had all kind of fruit trees, apple, pear, plums. We had pecan trees, walnut trees. So we had everything we needed within the farm. But then we had a big front that he designated as a baseball diamond. And the kids would come once a month and play ball, and my grandparents would cook hot dogs and different things. So we had a beautiful growing up. Mm-hmm.
This question we're asking everyone across the state. What's your favorite place?
What, here? Oh, for different states?
Oh, no, here in Virginia. Do you have a favorite place you like to be, or for any reason?
Well, one thing, I like the Triumph Baptist Church that I came back after school, and I'm still a member. I was baptized in that church. And then I like to come to Farmville and visit and go up and down Main Street.
How has the place changed over the years?
Well, now I think that before it was like two cultures when you were going through transition from segregation to integration. You still do have two cultures, but I think they are beginning to unite more and understand and work together more. I think we are building a better community together.
This is another question we ask everyone across the state. What's in your backyard?
What's in my backyard? A shed, a garage, and a maple tree and walnut trees.
Okay, last question. What are your hopes?
Well, my hopes is to see an even more unified Prince Edward County, Virginia, bringing all sides together. Because during the transition from segregation to integration, it not only affected blacks, it affected whites too. Because when the schools closed down, there were whites that were not able to go to the private schools. So we all suffered through that. So I just want to see where it's more unified, and that the younger generation of today understand the struggle, but still keep in mind that they can make a difference. If we did as teenagers, they can make a difference in the world.
It's a great way to end. Thank you.
You're welcome.